We know a lot about today's students. Nearly 40% are older than 25 and attend school part-time. 31% are at or below the federal poverty line. 25% are parents, and 64% of today's students work while they're in college. With this pervasive blurring of lines between learning and work, it's reasonable to expect that there's high quality learning happening on the job and in other settings that should count toward a credential. Our partners at Research for Action have been hard at work studying this growing movement in institutions and states to count and credential more high quality post-secondary level learning happening on the job. They've developed a state policy menu in partnership with Lumina that's aimed at ensuring all learning counts. Whether you're interested in one component of the agenda or think your state's ready to tackle it all, we're here to support you. Reach out to me or anyone else on our state policy team for more information. Now let's turn it over to our team at RFA.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kate Shaw, and today my colleague Ginger Hunter and I are going to be talking to you about a project that we've been working on throughout 2020 with the support of the Lumina Foundation. And the goal of this project has been to determine how states could create an environment that recognizes all post-secondary level learning, regardless of where it occurs. And today we'll be telling you what we found. Before I start, I just want to give you a little introduction to Research for Action, which is our organization. RFA is an education research nonprofit located in Philadelphia, and we're a mission-driven organization focused specifically on educational equity. For the last 25 years, we bridged the research to practice divide by studying some of the most pressing problems in pre-K through 16 education and producing reports and dissemination strategies that are designed to support meaningful reform and to improve equity. We have a robust post-secondary state policy portfolio that includes large multi-state studies on topics such as outcomes-based funding, statewide college promise programs, state policy reform focused on racial equity, and also placement reform and developmental education reform. We also provide advice, guidance, and counsel to states as they try to engage in these reform efforts. Our work is informed by substantial on-the-ground experience in both state policy and institutional leadership positions. I am the Executive Director of Research for Action, and I'm a former Pennsylvania SHIO. And Ginger is a Senior Research Associate at RFA, and she's a former Program Manager of University of Pennsylvania's Exec Doc program. And she also was the colleague that directed this project. So what do we mean by the term all learning counts? All learning counts is essentially a catchphrase that describes a state policy environment in which both formal and informal post-secondary level learning that occurs outside of the classroom is recognized by higher ed institutions and by employers as college level learning. A statewide policy environment that is all learning counts friendly also creates a credentialing system that ensures that this learning is equally valued and transferable across all post-secondary institutions. It also includes learning and credentials that are stackable so that learners have multiple entry and exit points throughout their careers, and so that they also understand how their learning can be credited towards credentials. And finally, it's an environment in which there are a myriad of state policies that support all learning counts, remove barriers to recognizing and credentialing learning that occurs outside of a classroom, and ensures accountability for institutions to recognize that this learning is occurring outside of the classroom. Why is now the time for all learning counts? All learning counts is really important because every year, millions of Americans gain lots of post-secondary level learning through their experiences in the workplace, through the military, through apprenticeships, and through professional certifications. But because we don't have a consistent way to recognize, reward, and transfer this learning, many people are left with strong post-secondary level skills and abilities, but no capacity to show post-secondary institutions or employers that they have these skills and competencies. When learning is recognized, efforts to do so rarely span sectors to create a statewide system that's consistent and transparent and easy for students to navigate. So, for example, you might have a community college or even a community college system that recognizes and credentials learning that occurs outside of a classroom through PLA, for example. But oftentimes, when they try to credential that learning, other institutions may not accept or acknowledge that learning. But states in particular are uniquely equipped to bring disparate systems together to create a statewide all learning counts environment by guiding their development through both policy and regulation. All learning counts also allows us to provide a particular focus on equity because, as we all know, individuals that obtain college level learning outside of the college classroom instead of inside of the college classroom are often those with barriers to attending college. For example, low income students, Black, Latinx, Native American students, or adult students that are juggling multiple responsibility. In such instances, their educational success is not determined by their skills or knowledge, but basically by our systems, by the degree to which our systems can recognize it and credential it. So when we create a system where all post-secondary learning counts, we can enable a flexible, affordable, and efficient pathway to college and career success. All learning counts also provides us with a tool to ensure economic resilience. As we all know, COVID makes recognition of all learning even more urgent as the economic hardships that are encountered by students and also by institutions themselves makes college out of reach for many. At the same time that college is out of reach for students, their need for recognizable credentials that recognize their past learning is even more urgent as the economy struggles to recover from COVID. So creating a more flexible and resilient post-secondary infrastructure will place those learners front and center where they belong and help ensure that they gain the credentials that they need to obtain living wage employment and to navigate our economy. The result of the work that we have been doing during the course of 2020 is an all learning counts state policy toolkit. And this toolkit is designed to help states determine where they are in terms of building an all learning counts state infrastructure and to help them determine how they might move forward in making those systems more robust. And so at this point, I'm going to pass my presentation off to Ginger, who's going to walk us through the All Learning Counts State Policy Toolkit and provide us with some examples of how states have engaged in this work.
Thanks so much, Kate. And so to create an all learning counts agenda for states, we really focused on 5 policy priority areas, and those are data, credit transfer, learning recognition, transparent credential pathways, and policy infrastructure. And I'll give you a quick overview of each of those 5 areas right now, as well as some state examples that we think are making progress in these areas and are good models to look at. So our first policy area is data, and it's hard to make all learning count if you can't track that learning. So we really advocate for statewide data systems that provide links to all credentials, whether that's diplomas, badges, certifications, licensures. We need to start looking beyond just the degrees that are offered at 2- and 4-year institutions and really look at credential learning everywhere it exists. And putting that all together in a statewide data system is one step towards making sure that that learning carries with the student throughout their careers. So we also suggest that these state policy priorities require annual reports that analyze credit awarded and disaggregate that by race, ethnicity, gender, and socioeconomic status, just to make sure that the states are aware of any gaps that may be existing and how well their policies are serving different populations. And we also, for equity purposes, suggest that states require that if data does reveal inequities that in how learning is counted, that they identify and adjust policies necessary to remedy any sort of opportunity or achievement gaps. And really, the success of a data system relies on strong governance or governing entity that can compel state agencies, institutions, non-traditional education providers, and others to report data regularly and accurately. And of all the states we looked at, we really felt that Kentucky and Washington stood out as states with strong PW data systems that track credentials outside of the traditional 2- and 4-year institutions. So both states were linking to other data sources like licensing boards and working to increase the types of credentials and credits that they can track and really make sure that that learning can carry with a student from institution or non-traditional education provider throughout their lifetimes. So the second policy priority area that we focused on is credit transfer. And this is, while a lot of states are moving towards statewide transfer agreements, there are still many states that have transfer systems that exist as sort of a piecemeal web of one-to-one agreements between institutions and other educational providers. And this can be really complex for students and leading them to a situation where they have to shop around to institutions that will transfer as many of their credits as possible into a program. And so for states to sort of remedy that and take the burden off of students, we are strongly advocating for statewide transfer and articulation agreements that are standardizing the way credits are transferred across institutions and creating more transparency for students. So some of the sort of policy must-haves that we identify are to make sure that certificates and associate degrees can include credit earned from out-of-college learning and that credit is transferable just the same way that a credit earned within an institution would be transferable. To make sure that these credits transfer towards degree requirements and not just general education requirements. And again, to require annual reports that detail the transfer and articulation patterns by race, ethnicity, and other demographics to make sure that any gaps uncovered by these reports can be focused on and remedied with policy shifts. Or the states that we identified as having strong transfer policy were Ohio and Oregon, and they really took different approaches to this. And Ohio really stands out because of the way that they've guaranteed transfers for so many out-of-college learning experiences, including military learning, apprenticeships, career and technical education. They have robust prior learning assessment guidance that's statewide, and all of those credits earned through alternative means are transferable. Oregon has taken a different approach by implementing statewide Common Core and major specific transfer maps that are also working to recognize more out-of-college learning. So the third policy priority that we focus on is learning recognition. And this is really how can states and institutions capture the learning that is occurring outside of a classroom and convert it into college credit. And most students who seek credit for learning that occurs outside of the college classroom have to navigate costly and time-intensive prior learning assessments or course challenges and similar processes that typically result in too few credits being awarded for what they know and are capable of. And frequently, students earn general education credits that don't get them any closer to the degree requirements for these prior learning assessments. So we really want states to focus on creating a robust statewide agenda for recognizing learning that occurs outside the classroom by, declaring that competencies can be mastered in many different settings and compelling institutions to award academic credit for competencies regardless of where that learning took place. States should work to standardize how out-of-classroom learning is translated to college credit and apply that credit recognition uniformly across all institutions. When possible, states should work to encourage institutions to move away from seat time requirements to more competency-based education curriculum. And when thinking about different forms of learning that happen outside of the college classroom, it's important to think beyond just military and on-the-job training and really look at the learning that might happen in low-wage jobs and occupations through volunteering, through community activism or community service. And again, with any policy areas, it's important to make sure that you address any equity gaps uncovered in annual reports and make sure that these policies are really serving all students and not just students who have additional resources or supports to get their college, to be successful in college. And there are many states that are focusing on improving learning recognition in different ways. The states we focus on in our toolkit are West Virginia, Colorado, and Ohio. West Virginia has done something really interesting by creating statewide degree programs that recognize credit for prior learning. It's the Regents Bachelors of Arts and the Board of Governors Associate of Applied Science. And students can earn a majority of their credits in both degrees from standardized prior learning credits. And it really creates a very flexible degree program for students who have a lot of on-the-job or other learning that they've acquired outside of the college classroom. Colorado has really taken a focus on credentialing work-related experience, and Ohio has really become a leader in standardizing state guidance on awarding military credit and other prior learning assessment credits. And those are some really great states to check out, and you can learn more about them in our toolkit and by visiting their state websites. So the fourth policy priority area that we're focusing on is transparent credential pathways. And really, when all learning counts, we can build systems that include and build upon past learning to provide clear pathways to specific post-secondary certificates and degrees. And these pathways can provide many on and off ramps to learners throughout their careers. That way, students can jump back into their college careers when they need more skills, jump back out when they're ready to re-enter the workforce, and make sure that that learning that they've accumulated throughout their careers and lifetimes stays with them as they progress. And so by states working to create pathways that are transparent, stackable, easy to access, and aligned to in-demand careers, we can remove unnecessary barriers and time and money for students. So it's important for states to create clear and easy to understand pathways, to create state-generated lists of stackable credentials that lead to in-demand occupations, and occupations that lead to family-sustaining wages is very important. And states can work through these pathways to ensure that students don't need to retake courses or pay to learn competencies that they've already mastered. And this will really help with affordability for students. And states should work to create policies that ensure that non-credit training is applied to degrees and credentials at as little to no cost for students. And Kentucky and Ohio really stood out to us as states that represent two different approaches to creating clear pathways that stack. The Kentucky Community and Technical College system has created stackable credential policies that include fractional credit for modularized courses that can be stacked into full-term courses. So basically the standard credit semester credit is broken into 3 parts, so students can just take the content that they need to master. Ohio has really built in stackability to complement their transfer and articulation system, and they've established this really great one-year option, which allows graduates from their Ohio technical centers to earn a block of technical hour credit that they can later apply to an associate's or technical degree when they are ready to continue their education. So the 5th policy priority that we focus on in our policy toolkit is policy infrastructure. And these are all the additional supports, removing of barriers and regulations that states can rely on to try and incentivize or support institutions as they work to really make sure that all learning counts for students. And there's many buckets that these sort of policy infrastructures can fall into, whether it's financial incentives for institutions to recognize credit or recognize learning that happens outside of the classroom for credit, building awareness of ALC policies. A big barrier sometimes is just student awareness of the different ways they can accumulate college credit, providing technical assistance to institutions, especially institutions that might be lower capacity or don't have the resources to have full-time staff dedicated to credentialing learning that happens outside the classroom, encouraging cross-sector collaboration, bringing together workforce partners with institutions to think more creatively about how to credential learning that happens outside the classroom. And, states should do more to recognize and validate non-traditional learning sites. These could be licensing boards, correctional facilities, major employers. All of these places are places where learners pick up valuable skills that can be applied to college credit. and are really equal to post-secondary learning that happens inside the classroom. And states that we identified that have provided really innovative policy infrastructures towards all learning counts are Florida and Washington. Florida has a creative and incentive-based approach to rewarding institutions for teaching content that's connected to industry credentials. And Washington has really created a robust regional support system for creating career-connected learning for students and providing technical assistance to institutions as they work to improve their credit for prior learning practices across the state. So, that was a lot to cover in a short amount of time. We really encourage you to visit our toolkit to learn more about all these states, and our toolkit provides links to all of these state innovations, which are really great to look at. We're really excited about all the activity that's happening across states to recognize more out-of-classroom learning. And I will turn it back to Kate to wrap us up.
As Ginger said, and as she's pointed out with all of her examples, all learning counts is an idea whose time has come. Given the pressures of COVID and racial injustice, it's really important for us as post-secondary education professionals to meet learners where they are and to recognize the learning that they are accumulating over time. But this is a difficult and ambitious agenda, as I think Ginger's presentation pointed out. And because of that, no state has really fully adopted all of the policy recommendations that Ginger just outlined to you. But the good news is that states aren't starting at ground zero, and there are lots of different examples of how states have engaged in this work that other states can learn from. And so we are so excited that our State Policy Toolkit will be released very shortly. It's not quite ready to launch today, but it should be launched very soon, within the next few weeks. And that toolkit includes more detail about all of the state policy plays that we're recommending, and also additional information or examples along the lines of what Ginger has already described to you. We also identify some common barriers and solutions to implementing an ALC agenda, and we also provide a glossary of terms, because many times in a newly growing field like this or a space like this, just making sure that we're all using the same language can be really helpful in moving our work along. So if you want to learn more about All Learning Counts, or if you want to know more about our state policy toolkit, please reach out to myself or Ginger. Our emails are provided here. And when our toolkit is launched on its website, we will be sure to blast that out via social media to ensure that people have access to this really great tool. Thanks, everybody.